Hi, it's Cameron Reynolds, and welcome to tonight's live chat. Thanks for patiently waiting as I horked down a bacon sandwich. I just had to get some carbs in me, or I would not be able to make it through the rest of this. I hope that you've brought some questions. I see several of our members in here, several of our friends, and oh, there's Jeremy Lindsay too. And hey, Jeremy, hope you're doing good. It's a great time of the year. I hope none of you were affected by that crazy weather. It got very close to several people that I know in other states, and it's really rough in a few neighborhoods. But thankfully, we just got a little flash flooding in this region. It's fairly typical for the valleys this time of the year to get uh, washed out a little bit. But the bees are looking great. We've had some good weather, lots of good pollen. I haven't fed pollen patties since February because there's just so much pollen in the hives, and there's no reason to. I mean, they'll eat it, but usually I don't see any difference when there's this much good flying days. So if you have any questions, let's take them. I'm also going to talk about a few other odds and ends that's going on, and while we are pre-questions, I'm going to show a product that I got recently. They were at our expo. It's 21st Bee. I got a couple of them in here. And it is a new style of frame. I mean, it is a solid plastic frame. There's a YouTube video where they're beating these things up and they just won't break with a couple pound. Yeah, there's 21st Bee right there. Thanks, Chris. And so this one is a 5.4 millimeter cell. They also have deep frames in 4.9 for those who are wanting the smaller cell. And I have a couple other frames. Whoops. Some for raising queens. Hey, Jonathan, watch it, man. um, funny. It's all the camera angles, man. Camera angles, and of course, then there's some drones as well. You know, see how big it is when you go like that. I just need to see it go like this back here. That's a lot better, isn't it? See, and this is the type of camera stuff I've trained Laurel to do to make me look larger than life in the videos, and then people meet me in person and are a little underwhelmed at some point. Hey, Brian. Hey, thank you so much again, Brian, for being a member and supporting our youth program. I have a couple of nukes fixing to be in the works for you guys. I'm hoping to graft here in just a handful of days. The weather's been great. The bees are booming. I had 2 colonies this week that were building swarm cells. I'm going to be using them as the cell builders and starters, and we're just seeing some really nice colonies. So get those queens going and just cross our fingers and always hope for 90 something percent success rate on our queens. That's why you always have to graft more. You just don't ever know what you're going to get. If you need 100 queens, it never hurts to graft 100 and have 150 cells. You know what I'm saying? Sure, came. It's the angles. It is. It's all about the angles. Randy McCaffrey isn't in the room. And so what are the holes in the middle of those frames for? So those are communication holes for bees to be able to go through and communicate. They may actually end up closing those off. The camera adds 20,000 cells. That's really nice. So just real quick, while I have this up here, you can see they're really solid. There's no place for the small hive beetles to hive into the top bars and end bars and bottom bars of this plastic frame versus your typical one piece plastic frame. And I think, we're going to put them on some hives here real shortly because our bees are starting to draw some wax just a tiny bit. The really strong ones that are just booming and having to clear room for the queens to lay. So where do you find those frames? It's 21st Bee. And Chris, if you don't mind, maybe pulling that website up. So I haven't tried these yet, but we are going to give them a shot. They are heavy duty, and that might be the only con is they are a heavier frame than a wooden frame typically is. But if you break one of these things, you are running it over with a tow motor, at least, I'm thinking. Actually, the 4.9 adds about 1,500 cells per deep frame. Wow. I knew it'd be a decent bit, but I suspected it'd be a handful of, 3 to 500. I didn't realize it would be up to 1,500. And some people speculate that the 4.9, because it's smaller, the brood emerges a little bit faster, lowering the success rate of the Varroa mite. It's been tested a lot. Opinions really abound on this. I would like to see more detailed research on it myself, just because I'm a curious guy and I don't know a whole lot about it. Journey, the outdoors, hunting and fishing, yes, they are pre-waxed. Hopefully, those frames don't have the warping issues of other plastic frames. I highly doubt that. I've fooled with a lot of different plastics over the years. I just don't see how these things can warp. I could see how you could knock somebody out senseless with one hit, but I don't know how they could warp. So there's a couple different options. If nothing crazy happens, we will definitely be seeing them in person again at the North American Honeybee Expo. Oh, I don't know, but maybe we'll find out, Jonathan. Hopefully, we'll have a good honey flow, and maybe I can do some videos on how much some of that stuff weighs and stuff like that. But it's nice to have some different options, and I really am interested on the mating frames as well. Like right now, I have my daughter cleaning up, and Jimmy as well, some of our old acorn and premier combs that maybe got slimed out by small hive beetles. And so we're pressure washing those off and letting them dry and then re-waxing them. And you really have to be careful with them. They get brittle as they get older, and they also warp super fast on a hot sunny day. So you have to make sure they're always stacked really flat and stuff until you're ready to wax them and use them. I just can't imagine these warping like at all. But I'll let you know if they do. If I was a betting man, I'd put $100 they're not going to warp. Even if Laurel beats me with one, I don't think it's going to affect the frame at all. Okay, so is there a set date yet for the expo, Chris? Oh, did I just drop another question? Bring me back to Brian here in just 1 second.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, so yeah, there's the link to the website. The dates are the second weekend in January, in Louisville, Kentucky again. And it was either the first, second, or third, or it was going to be January 8th, 9th, and 10th. And so that is super exciting to be able to get finally. I think a lot of people have assumed that I wanted the first weekend because that's just what I wanted. It was actually the only choice, and in Sevierville and in Louisville. And the reason it was available is because people didn't really want it. Thankfully, Louisville had a shakeup in their like administration they were going through, and anyone that didn't have a contract kind of was like kicked to the side, and it gave us an opportunity to get a contract in and get it signed for this upcoming year, so we have it locked down. It's going to make it so much better for our trade show. It really cramped a lot of our vendors' style last year, and kudos to our vendors who did a phenomenal job putting on the best display we've ever seen. But it did limit them in several ways and make it very difficult. And there was a lot of people that couldn't make it. And Chris, this if you're looking forward to like any type of fun trip with me to some cool bee exotic location, you're not helping your chances out right there.
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, what you're talking about. Yeah. Well, no, we're actually going to go and film up in Michigan here next week. So together, you guys will be seeing that video come out in the near future, and it'll be really cool. I cannot wait. So was
there's Brian's. Yep.
Our woods are thinning. I'm about to plant some seedlings outside of sourwood tulip tree. What would be some good trees for zones 6 through 8? Linden, basswood trees. They do take a little bit of time. There are some varieties out there that are supposed to be faster growing and blooming than others, but you can't hardly beat basswood for nectar quality. And in a year where it's booming, like it'll produce like every year that, as long as it's not a terrible weather event. But some years, basswood just drowns your bees in nectar. It's phenomenal. And so basswood's a great one. Tulip poplar, black locust, if those grow good in your area. I know holly trees grow well in your area, Brian. So that would be something that would probably do quite well. And holly blossoms are the way that they're angled. They don't get washed out as easily as some things. And holly trees are, really hardy. And so, as far as trees go, that's really what comes to mind for your region there in New Jersey. If I can think of anything, Brian, though, I'll let you know in the next live stream. So
before we dig into those, we have this one question from the email that came in, or from your website. Figured you could address this. This is from Evelio. It says, thank you for the videos. I'm learning a lot. I'm new to beekeeping in my second year living in mid-Tennessee. I lost my colony this year during the winter. I have 2 10-frame brood boxes full of resources. My questions are, there's 3 of them. First one, can I use these brood boxes to attract a swarm? If so, what are the procedures and what do I need to do?
Okay. Well, we're actually hoping to have a video on that soon, but we'll go ahead and do that now. So you really don't want to have a lot of resources in a swarm box or anything like that, because what wax moths and small hive beetles want is primarily protein. So dead brood, bee bread, or really old comb. Sounds like yours is not at all, but the darker combs have a lot of pupal casings in there, and they do better in that versus very nice young wax. And so you don't really want to put that out there, especially the bee bread, because you'll come back to your swarm trap and you'll have wax moth damage. And so typically on a swarm trap, I do want to have 1 comb in there. And if you have some old ones you don't carry, you have extra, you can do 2, but you really want them to be empty of all resources. You want it to have that nice brood smell. And I'm sure those still do, but I don't want to put a honey frame or anything like that in there. Typically with our swarm traps, we'll have 1 frame in there. That is maybe got a lot of drone brood on it, or maybe just slightly damaged in an area, but it's still going to really lure in bees. We want to use a little bit of lemongrass. You can use, Swarm Commander too. Lemongrass works phenomenal, and but both of those work very good at catching swarms. Don't over apply that. Stick to the recommended amount. Just a couple of drops of good strong lemongrass oil. Come back a couple weeks later, and if you don't have anything, reapply a couple more drops. If you go to town and you just over apply this, it's off-putting actually. And if the bees stick around, a lot of times you'll see where they're building underneath the trap. So oftentimes there's too much swarm lure in there. Also, if you have any propolis, you can warm that up and just take a little torch and smear that on the walls in there. The rest of the cavity, I typically put empty frames in there with a starter strip, because they do prefer that open space versus like solid foundations. They would prefer to have mostly open frames. Some people just leave the box open and let the bees just build in there, and then they cut it out and rubber band it into frames. I don't like that much work, but hey, to each their own. Ultimately, you want something that's around a 10 frame deep box or slightly larger cavity size. You can catch bees in 5 frame nukes and stuff like that, but the really prime colonies, very rarely will they go into a cavity that small, because they're just way too big. And you'll catch all kinds of stuff if you do a lot of this. You'll find if you set out like 20 traps, you'll get some 2 frame swarms. You'll get some that just fill up a 10 frame box immediately. And it's amazing. So swarm trapping is quite fun, but primarily we want hive smells. The more it smells like some old brood comb, but I don't want resources. 0 resources. Good question.
And then his second question is, which method? Yep. Yeah, these are the 2 questions. Which method of mite testing do you prefer? Alcohol, powdered sugar, or CO2?
The alcohol one, every time you see a mite, you just take a shot, and until you don't see mites anymore. It's a terrible joke. The alcohol wash was my favorite. It's still really good. Sorry, Laurel, I couldn't help myself. I thought it was funny. the shake of the head of disapproval. I'm a
audience doesn't approve.
Yeah. I'm a disappointment. So the thank you, Bandit. I appreciate it. You and I will be in the doghouse together, I'm sure. So the soap wash, the Dawn dish liquid works just fine as well. Randy Oliver, during the whole COVID stuff where you couldn't get alcohol hardly at all, you had to come up with another way of washing for mites that still had as good of efficacy. The Dawn dish liquid works just as good or better. And you want to use like the dark blue Dawn Ultra stuff. And it's like a tablespoon and a half per gallon. You don't want to add too much or it gets really soapy, which sometimes can be a little bit of an issue. But I've started using that because it's cheaper. And, alcohol dries your hands out and your gloves and stuff a lot more. And, soap is just so darn cheap. So, but both of those work really good. I don't like the powdered shake method. You're just beating your bees to death, and those bees aren't going to live very long. They've tested, and any of the bees that went through a powdered sugar shake, they die shortly afterwards because you just bludgeon them to death.
You got a question here from Nathan. He was here last night, and he had this question for you.
Hi, Nathan. Thanks for your question and for hopping on. And thanks for the pickup of the nukes. Possibly. I was working on that like right before. It's part of the reason I was a little bit late, and we're just trying to get through it. Chris is working on a website system that's going to be way better. He just didn't have time to do it this year. It's not his fault at all. But so we're doing an old system that Laurel and I had put together of a Google form and stuff, and it's people have a lot of problems with it. We're still trying to figure out. Like there's people who paid and never filled out the form, and we're trying to hunt them down. And I always have some extras, Nathan, but I kind of got to make sure where we're at. I will. Let me write this down. I will get back with you. I need to email you anyways, and I will see if we can get you those extra 4 nukes. And thank you very much. I will be in touch.
All right. We have more questions. Here we go. Justin with a nice mite question for you.
What would a standard mite treatment schedule look like this time of the year if you had a hive with a fairly high mite load? So you got to get those mites under control. The good news is, say in Tennessee or most places, you have the majority, if not all of your nice weather and more importantly, nutrition ahead of you. Bees can bounce back really good when they have a long period of multiple brood cycles of good nutrition and weather. Dearth periods are difficult to fix a high mite colony because even if you get the mites under control, sometimes between the stress from the mites and the stress from the treatment, it can set the bees back quite a bit and it's hard for them to rebound. So typically what I've done when I found a high mite colony this year is, let's say it's not high enough to keep them from getting to a honey production size. I'm going to use something that is not going to damage and contaminate my combs, my honeycombs. So I'm going to be supering here in about 14 days, give or take a few days, depending on the weather. And so I really want to use a formic acid pad, but I don't want to use 2 pads. I'm going to use one, and then I'm going to come back and use another one. And so it doesn't do quite so much knocking back of the bees because I kind of want my honey crop too. Then what I would do after that is do an oxalic acid extended release. And maybe even if you have some oxalic acid, like a vaporizer, just hit them. Boom, boom. Hobby beekeepers can spend a lot more time. It's difficult when you have hundreds of hives. It's like, okay, we got 100 hives to do this too. Darn it. Because you probably, if it's a high mite load and there's this much brood and you don't do formic and you're just doing the vapor, 5 treatments is going to just start getting you forward progress with this much brood. You really need to just apply and do a wash. So I would do a wash now if you haven't already, and then do one after the treatment and see where you are and make sure that you get that down because yes, we'd like to maybe produce some honey if it's a strong colony, but we definitely don't want to lose this colony. And it's not off to a good start if you're already seeing a decent bit of mite. So formic acid pads once a piece, but I only do that on strong colonies. I don't like using formic on anything less than like 16 frames of bees or more, because it sets them back a little bit. So you can use some other products out there, but if I'm looking at it from a honey flow standpoint, it's formic acid or it is oxalic acid in some form or fashion. I'm going to be using the oxalic acid extended release strips. There's a Viroxan, and I'm going to be putting them on with my honey supers. And my colonies don't have any detectable mite loads that I've been able to find so far. And that's exactly what I wanted. I treated them multiple times with oxalic acid vapor in December and in January when they had no brood, and really cleaned them up good. I'm going to go ahead and put those strips on because the mites are low. If it'll keep it low for a long period of time, that's really useful to me. So that's what I would do, Justin. So
real quick, go ahead. I mean, do you want to adjust this? Or do you
so
want
we're working on this right now. It's going to take some time. Some of the hotels won't even get us the deals for a decent ways into the year that before they even start setting prices for the following year. We ask everyone, please be patient. We are working already with the hotels and lining things up, but we'll be able to get better pricing for everybody if we can get ahead of that before everyone starts buying rooms. Because I mean, if they already see 500 people at the expo purchase rooms, like, oh, the demand's up, all the prices go up, and that kind of stuff. So we're working on that. We'll have that available probably sometime around the time tickets are available. That's the goal. And Chris is helping out, so it won't be like in the past where we try to get something done. It's a month later. Just found out that I really stink at grafting. Can I borrow Laurel for an afternoon? Nope, you can't. She's too useful. I can't spare her. Are you kidding me? There's nothing that she can't do, and she's good looking to boot. I mean, it's hard to beat,
All right, you got a question here from Doe Avron. I'm sure I butchered that.
Catching swarm can lead to an apiary that tends to swarm later. Can a solution be to pinch the queens and replace after the flow? Yeah, yeah. You can, if the queen doesn't have desirable traits that you don't want, you can do that. And basically, if you're worried about like, so for example, some people like don't ever let any colonies that are swarming, don't use those swarm cells and create new colonies off of that. That's going to be a problem. You're going to breed for swarming and all that. I think it depends. So if I'm seeing some of my earliest colonies wanting to swarm right now, and I am seeing a couple of them like that, and one of them even had room, they just weren't utilizing their space properly. I don't want those genetics. They're not using their space properly. They had cells, and it was like the 12th of this month. So that's really early. Now, if I see some of my colonies that are wanting to swarm and it's April or later, or especially if it's my fault and I didn't give them enough space early on, or if it's just a crazy good honey year, I use cells from those. I don't see that as a problem. Now, if you're talking about catching a swarm, you don't know what those genetics are. Maybe the bees are really aggressive and you don't like that. Maybe they're really runny on the combs. You don't like it. Yeah. Let them build up. Let that queen build them up and then replace the queen whenever you deem necessary.
All right. Next question comes from, you already got that one, Weston.
What's the average pounds of sugar that you use per hive per year? That's a good question. I don't know exactly. Pollen patties, I use a lot less, so it's easier to gauge. It really just depends on the year. If we have a terrible drought in fall and we don't have much of a fall flow, it can be just gallons and gallons of 1-to-1 per hive. I've already fed each colony a little bit this spring. Probably each colony has received somewhere around 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of fairly, probably about 1.5 to 1. So probably 2 gallons of 1-to-1 equivalent, some thereabouts. And it really just stimulates them so well coming out of winter. The ones that were light definitely benefited quite a bit, and I put buckets on a couple of the really light ones. But then I won't have to feed until the end of June, and then if I leave a lot of honey on, I don't even have to feed then. But I usually take a lot of honey, and then I feed and I draw comb out with those colonies. If you strip them down really light, almost all the way down to like just a single deep box, and there's just like two deeps of bees, you have to feed a bunch, but I'll feed 6 to 8 gallons over the next 2 months and draw out one or two deep boxes on those colonies of brand new comb. And so 100 colonies times that much comb, that really adds up really quick. I don't know what the number is. It really depends on the year and what I'm trying to do, but I feed a lot. And I find the more I feed and the better my mite control and my feeding management program is, the more bees I have come through winter, and it's not just I have more of them survive. I have colonies that right now I'm having to pull brood out of and give them to the nukes that I overwintered because they're just too big and they're awesome looking. All right, next question, Chris.
Yep, I'm just gonna keep going down the line, everybody. So we will get to your questions at some point here. So thanks for everybody for putting them in here. Next one up is from Rick.
Hey, Rick. I had a large winter kill in my horizontal hive starvation. I believe due to our extended freezing weather prevented the cluster moving to the next frame. Your thoughts? If there was a big enough of a gap and it was a long enough cold period, it is possible. I don't know the size of the cluster. I don't know how big the gap was, but if they just run out of food and heck, it's an inch and a half away, there's maybe an empty frame in between them and a really solid frame of food, and they run out on that cold period and they just can't get over, then absolutely. This is one of the reasons why, um, with Langstroth or my horizontal hives, sometime in November for me or December, I go in there, and wherever the cluster is, just all the honey frames get put over it into there. And when we feed a good bit too, and we just plug out that area. We don't want it completely plugged out because bees do want to have in the core of the cluster several bees sticking their heads into cells. And it's really tight because you have the bees encasing the frames, but then you have bees inside the combs generating heat as well. So you don't want it completely plugged out. But the more and more I've done this over the last few years, the more I'm liking it and considering doing it to every one of my hives. And that is, okay, we have double deep colonies, but why do I need them in double deeps? None of my colonies are double deep strong as a winter cluster. A good cluster for me, especially with carnies, is about an 8 frame. A really good one is around 10 frames strong. So why do they need to be in 20 frames of space? Why can't I put all of the honey frames down below when they're broodless? And now they can dominate their space. They can create better air currents, um, or currents of air, because they're going to be right up against the lid, which means that lid isn't going to get very cold, especially if they're a strong cluster. So you're not going to get that condensation buildup above the bees because it's going to stay warm, and it's not that air that's water laden is not going to condense until it hits the cold walls of the hive and will drain down harmlessly to the sides. And it's harder for them to get away from their food that way also, when you or do that at the end of the year. So horizontal hives probably have a little bit more of a chance of doing that. Sorry that you had that happen, Rick. But it's definitely one of these things where I'm starting to pay a lot more attention to prepping going into winter, and also condensing the hive. I have stacks of combs ready to go on hive soon, and we're starting to put our seconds on it. I'm really liking it.
All right, next question up here from David. Small hive beetles.
So this is a great time to kill them, David. We have some hives that have 50 of them in there or more. There's some hives that we hardly see any of them. It's a great time to kill them because they can't hardly get out and fly right now. It's too cool. They want to be around the colony, and they're hungry. And the colonies are getting bigger, and they're starting to push them towards the edges. Put yourself some traps in there. Start killing them now, But all it takes, David, is either someone like maybe even you, one of your colonies collapse from small hive beetles, or maybe has some other issues. They're queenless, and they collapse from small hive beetles. Usually, small hive beetles is a secondary issue. Some other reason the bees are weak, and then that happens. But the thing of it is, however the bees died and the hive beetles did their thing, I mean, that could be thousands and upon thousands of beetles. And so it may not even been you. It may have been a tree full of bees and they died out, went queenless, and had 2,000 pupae shoot out into the soil. And now you have all of those beetles. And so just go ahead and get them now, get them early in the season so they're not as bad later on. You'll always have them. So here's a question about Viroxan. I haven't tested it enough to be able to say if it's awesome. They make some very bold claims, but that you also have to use a lot of strips, 8 strips for a double deep. It's quite a bit. I have used some oxalic acid cardboard strips, not from them. And I have used a little bit of theirs, but not. I got them so late in the year from Foxhound Bee Supply, and it wasn't Adam's fault. He got them to me as soon as Foxhound got them in. It was just really too late in the year to test them properly. So I'm going to be watching them closely, putting them on my hives this year multiple times and seeing how well they do. I do really like the concept, and what I have seen from different things like Randy Oliver's sponges. We did a video on that. I've tried other oxalic acid and cardboard. I really like these things. I don't know if Roxanne is going to be as good as some of the other stuff, but I really like the concept of a gentle product that's not contaminating my honey, and it's gentle on the cluster, and the mite population isn't going like this. It's kind of flatlining for a while, buying me more time. And then when I do get to my treatment, I'm treating maybe a 1% infestation versus a 2 to 3% infestation, which is a big deal. So I want to say thank you to Brian J. Mater for donating to our live chat. If you got a question, Brian, hit us with it, and happy beekeeping.
I didn't even see that come through on my end. That's weird.
Yeah. I'm on
blind.
top of things, man.
I know you are. Okay, you got that one. Here's another. You were talking about small hive beetles. Just to add on to that just a little bit.
Yeah, using grow bags around your hives and stuff. Have you experimented with it for killing small hive beetles around hives? I haven't, and it may do a fantastic job. My thoughts are, if they're already getting out of the hives into the ground, maybe I should have been killing them beforehand. You can do both. I know it was nice when I had my chickens. They loved getting under the beehives, but there's pollen that dropped down. There was all kinds of other things that dropped down. There's probably tons of ants in the frass, getting this multiple stuff, and small hive beetles. But personally, I just like to kill them, the adults instead, and put traps inside the hives. I typically just do it strategically this time of the year, later in the year, or if I make up some mating nukes or some little colonies, I'm going to really focus on those periods of time. There's several things that you can do out there. There's some commercial solutions out there that wipe them out quite handily. And then there's a new product that's being worked on by the University of Georgia that's supposed to really just target them specifically. And I'm hoping that works out and gets done soon.
You have a donation here from Rylan.
Has the weather affected you at all so far? Heard other places down south had to push back a few weeks. So yeah, it's a cooler year than normal. Well, it's what's been happening the last several years anyway. Whatever normal is. So things are probably a week behind. Looking at the plants, bloom date looks at least 7 days behind. The bees look about 5 to 7 days behind as well. But I don't think they're behind the plants, though. That's the important thing. And so this has caused us to have to push some, queen rearing and nukes and stuff back as well. But that's just part of it. The bees look good and the plants look good. I just think we got more cold weather this year. A lot of places did down south. So it is what it is. But as far as negatively affected us, sometimes I've been worried about it, and I'm like, man, this year's looking pretty crappy or whatever. And then it turns out to be a great year. And then sometimes it's off to just a wonderful start, the most perfect start. And then you get 21 days of rain in May during half of your honey flow, and your bees lose weight during the time of the year they're usually filling supers up. So you just don't know. And so I try not let it get to me too much or guess, because it'll be what it'll be. Thanks, Rylan. Good to see you again.
A real quick addition here. 21st B asked just to make sure that your listeners and viewers know this.
Okay, so you give a 20% discount to veterans on all regular orders. We want to make sure we thank them for their service with a discount year round. Wow, 20% for veterans. That's awesome. So thank you for sharing that on here, 21st B. And interesting to see how these work. I can't wait to smack Chris with one later.
I'm sure I deserved it.
100%. That leprechaun joke was not funny.
Well, Craig's still in the chat. He was sad he missed it, so you can rest on the fact he didn't get to see his joke.
That's great. I do enjoy that. Thank you.
Okay. Next question here from Robert.
Hello from Arkansas. Question: I was at a beginner's beekeeping class and told that 1.33 to 1 sugar water was better for bees to draw out comb. What is your recommendation? Wow, that is really specific. It's a tool. There's some guys that have tested and gone 2 to 1 drawing out comb versus 1 to 1 versus half a pound of sugar to 1 pound of water. It's really about, I think there is something to be said about stimulation, but I don't think it really depends on how you're delivering it too. It's not just the ratio. There's flood feeding and there's trickle feeding. And ideally what we'd like to have is a steady stream of thinner stuff. I think there's a little bit of an edge given to thinner syrups versus thicker syrups, no doubt. But I have fed bees straight pro sweet, which is like 3 to 1 ish or more. And I've gotten some pretty good comb drawing out of that. So I don't know. I think the main thing is flood feeding. Like, we use a 2-gallon frame feeder, and a double deep colony will just take that down in like a day and change. Versus we put on a 2-gallon bucket with small holes and limit it to where it takes them 5 to 7 days to take it down. I think there's 2 factors going to play here. But when I'm drawing comb, I like to use thinner stuff. I don't want to pack out that brood nest. Even if it's during a dearth, maybe they already have a lot of food. So it really just depends on what's going on. But there's times when I'm like, holy smokes, these colonies are dangerously light. I'm feeding as close to 2 to 1 as I can make it in July if necessary. And because I'm trying to put weight on them at that point. So it's really just about what I'm wanting to do in the moment. And if I'm looking at these colonies, I'm like, yeah, we still want to draw comb, but they all really are at a good weight point. We don't want to add a lot of weight. I'm doing 0.5 to 1 pounds of water. So it's, that's really thin, but nectar is really thin too. 1 to 1 is quite heavy for nectar. Most nectars aren't anywhere close to 1 to 1. So it's just a tool to me. I don't know where they got 1.33 to 1 sugar. It'd be interesting to see a study if they have one on that.
All right. Next up, you have a question here from Jay about watering.
Last year, my bees kept getting water from my neighbor's bird feeder. I put out a tub of water last year and they never touched it. How do I convince them to use it as a provided source? That's a great question. And I think that's great to ask Bob next time I talk to him. I'm just kidding. I don't know. Bees are really fickle when it comes to their water sources. They probably know something that we don't. I've seen bees pass a super clean spring water that I drink and go for a mud puddle every time. I don't know why. I've seen bees down at my parents' creek. It's always really cool to watch them gather that on the creek sand. But then they'll go to the neighbor's pool too, and there's just a bunch of different bees. Probably start early and maybe put a little bit of like a salt block in there. I know that some guys say that having some of the mineral salts in there really attracts them because they want some of that minerals in there. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it's something to think about. I really don't know if there's some literature out on that. It'd probably be better than what I could tell you. That's just me throwing ideas out.
Did you have something?
Yeah. Yvonne, hey, good to see you. I do create some extra shade for some hives that are in just crazy hot weather. We always get that here in Tennessee. And what I like to do is just throw an extra lid on there. Most of the heat escapes through the lid, and I find most of the heat is coming in through a dark lid too. So, putting that on top can really help get a little bit more deep shade and keep that down a little bit. You can do other things for shade as well, but I just throw an extra lid on there. I don't get real fancy. There's a big difference in dark lids versus light colored lids. Let's say a white migratory lid versus a really dark wax dipped lid. And so if you're in a hot area, I think there's a big advantage to having a light colored hive. And it definitely makes your bees work less in those hot days. You have to kind of weigh the balance on that. I still choose to wax dip my equipment, and the equipment gets dark, but the bees can handle it, but they are going to burn through more resources because they're having to put more energy in cooling the hives down.
All right, you have a question here from Michael Buck on OA treatments.
Doesn't OA treatments also slow the queen down, just not as bad? Still, 5 treatments will make a difference in queen laying. So at 2 grams, I've never seen an eyeball difference. Like if we're going like 2 grams per brood chamber, so a double deep would be 4 grams, 5 rounds. I've done that many times, like in a whole apiary for multiple years. I've never been able to visibly see big impacts, like anything noticeable at all. Now, when you start going up to like 8 grams per shot, yes, I start seeing it. Does it have an effect? Probably, but it just may be really small and just not enough to notice. I'm sure it has some type of effect. Obviously, it's disrupting the colony as it's being applied. There's some good news coming out on oxalic acid. We'll have it here on our channel. I'm not at liberty to discuss it right now, but it's exciting stuff, and I wasn't sure if we'd ever kind of get some of this information. And ultimately, it probably won't affect a lot of people because it will affect them, but it's not like it's useful information that you'll go and do your own stuff. All the oxalic acid vaporizers will be more fine-tuned to this information, which is good. We want as much oxalic acid going into the bowl and getting into the hives as possible. And what's really interesting and frustrating is that some of the methods we've been employing over the past decade or so, we've probably been only getting about 30% of our actual oxalic acid into the colony versus a much, much higher percentage. And temperature has a lot to do with it, but it's also has to do with how long it's in there on a warm, hot surface. So I won't say any more on that, but always good to see more knowledge and science being done that's practical and helpful to our bees. We're going to take the time to get out there and light those mites up. I want as much of those mites getting burned by oxalic acid as possible. I don't like doing it, but it's an important job.
All right, here you had a question here from EC about the nukes. Just want to address that real quick.
EC, how's the nuke pickup for the Tennessee purchase looking? So I assume that's the one for April 26th. We got a couple of them going. We got one on May 3rd, but so far so good. We're just going to have to see on the latter ones. On the overwinter nukes, everyone is going to be receiving an email, I would say by tomorrow, if you got an overwintered nuke. And so I'll have more information on that in that email. But it's really hard to tell on the later nukes if you're talking about the Gainsboro, Tennessee pickup. we may have some great weather and everything's on schedule. Might push it back a week or so. We'll just have to see.
I did see that the growing success. It's Brian, right? Am I like dreaming that it's Brian? No.
I can't remember their name, but they're the ones that bought Dogwood Ridge
Yeah.
from.
I totally blank on his name. He just anyway. They just announced that they're moving their package bees back 1 to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I'm just for context. Maybe that's why somebody's saying something.
And we're going to see. I've been talking to a lot of commercial guys. We're going to see a lot of packages get pushed back. Part of it's because of the bee losses. Some of it's because of the cooler weather they've had down in Georgia and Florida, where a lot of these things are produced. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. We'll just have to wait and see. Hopefully, we'll get some awesome weather here soon, and everything will just work out for everybody.
And you kind of answered it here, but Barry did donate, so I wanted to highlight him.
Oh yeah, thanks, Barry. Roll Tide, all that kind of stuff. Thank you so much. When will your email go out in the pickup of Corey's nukes? So those will also go out this week. Those will be a lot easier to keep on the schedule because we are actually getting the queens in from Chris Warner. These queens have already been laying for like 4 weeks when we get them. So there's a lot less variables with that versus us raising queen cells and then that queen cell having to go mate, come back, and then build up a colony. These ones with Chris Warner are already tested, so we're going to be splitting them into probably like 3 frames of, like 2 frames of brood, a frame of honey, and then put a couple of foundations in there, and then we're going to feed them. We'll be doing that here very soon, and they'll be ready. Those I seriously doubt are going to be changing dates at all, Barry. It would take some bizarre weather. It's so much easier when you have a mated queen, though, versus a queen cell. All right. So, if we missed any questions up top, just bring them down towards the bottom and let us know. Sometimes we just miss them. There's so many comments and questions and all that kind of stuff.
Next, I'm on this here. Next question we got from Athens about OA strips here.
So I put the OA strips on mine last week and noticed today when the strip sits, it burns the uncapped and uncapped brood normal. Yes, very normal. And I don't think all of it is just that it burns it. It probably does. But I also think that whenever you have a strip that's up against those cells, I think they need to be able to get a little bit of airflow, humidity through there, and a few other odds and ends. I think there's more to it than just the oxalic acid burning, but I know that oxalic acid isn't good to have on your skin too. The reason I say that is I've seen other strips or other materials go up against brood, and it ends up not working out many times. It makes me wonder what else is going on. But yes, that is normal, and it's unfortunate. The bees will create a divot there to go underneath the strip over time. But once you remove that strip and the bees get enough time and start brooding heavily, they'll draw that back out. It won't be a problem. The nice thing about oxalic acid is that it just doesn't absorb into the wax long term. It just breaks down into natural components, and it's a really nice change versus amitraz and other stuff that'll just build up toxicity into our combs. It's nice to have more natural products.
All right. Question about fire. Well, someone's asking about fire ants and black ants under the hive.
Any recommendations for fire ants? Put fire to them. For black ants, I don't know. Throw some bait down there. All jokes aside, one of the best things that I've done to get rid of ant problems is get rid of the inner cover. I use migratory lids. There's not a spot in my lid where the bees can't get to. And whenever I had the inner covers, the bees couldn't get up there in between. And so ants and all kinds of critters, roaches and anything else, just love being up in there because obviously sometimes they can sneak some resources, but it's also a very warm and dry environment. And so once I ditched all the inner covers, I didn't have a problem. Now, fire ants are a little bit of a problem. I do not want to have those crawling up my legs. I'd rather get stung by bees so many times over versus getting stung by a handful of fire ants. So Just there's products out there for them. I know some people are concerned about the pesticides. Um, there's granular stuff. You can be careful with it. And there's other things that are, you know, a little bit of diesel, whatever. Just there's ways to deal with them, but just be careful using anything real close to the hive. They can be a problem, especially in a weak hive. Ants can cause some serious problems if the hive is weak.
All right. Here, somebody just here. I see this lately. Just to go with that question.
Do you suggest those lids for northern states with colder temps? So I know guys that use migratory lids up north, and what they'll do is create polystyrene R5 or R10 uh, like rims. It's kind of like a feeder rim, but it houses this polystyrene. And so they put the migratory dealio on top of that, and they put that insulation right up against it. So you have that great insulation there. And then they wrap their hives or something like that to keep any rain or anything from getting in between. There's a couple of different ways to do this. I know some guys are using migratory tops and then switching over to a winter lid. Some guys just do migratory and just do like a whole plank over 2 colonies on a 4-way pallet or a 6-way. There's just a lot of different ways to do this. So migratory lids definitely have some disadvantages in really northern areas that get a lot of rain for sure, but stay quite cold. But there's guys up there that do it though, so there's ways to do it. I've never kept my bees up north. I just have observed from afar, and that's all I can say is what I've observed. I don't know all the techniques. And personally, after posting about the guy in Finland who was working his bees in the snow today, he was doing oxalic acid dribble, and it looked like there was 2 to 3 feet of snow on the ground. And he's got the lid open. The snow's not melted, so it's got to be below freezing. And he's putting oxalic acid dribble on the colonies. There are a lot of new beekeepers and some that are not so new that'll tell you you just cannot do these things. Yes, you can. Um, I've made splits at 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Every single one of the queens made it. I did 5 of them. I got some queens from Hawaii. The weather, it was early March when I got them. I wasn't planning on it, and I made splits, and I did it really fast. None of the brood was damaged. All the splits worked out great. Healthy, strong colonies are tough. They're really tough if they're healthy and strong. So you just have to be quick, and you kind of have to have a little experience there. But so don't ever put yourself in your mind in this box of what you can do and what you can't do. There are people up in Finland and Sweden. They don't use upper entrances, but they have techniques, and they know what they're doing. So again, don't listen to guys like me about overwintering advice like religiously. You might get an idea, and then go learn from someone who's actually doing it. My favorite guy for that is Etienne Tardif, and I've done an interview or 2 with him. I've had him at my conference. He did the microscopy class this year. Etienne's awesome. Overwinters bees north of the 60th parallel. If you're wanting overwintering device like hardcore humidity data, how much bees burn through with this much insulation as far as honey or winter resources versus a double deep setup with this much insulation. This guy has the numbers. If you're wanting to be super highly successful in winter and you're not following Etienne Tardif, you better know somebody who's doing a really good job. I think Etienne is one of the best out there for that information.
Just a quick little addition. The bees love to eat your typical, foam board that you put up there. So
yeah.
I don't recommend putting it in like long term because I lost all my foam out of almost all my lids, and it becomes much less insulative when they eat it all. So not saying it doesn't work, just they will eat it. So
yeah, you've really got to paint it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you
had 2 donations come in here. First one from Paul.
Okie doke. Oh, hey, Paul. Thanks for donating, and thanks for saying that about the Dalen folks or Dallin or however I think it's Dallin. I don't want this channel to be all one-sided. I personally probably believe different than many of the people who watch my channel. I think that's what makes the world go round as different ideas. Some people have a really hard time with controversial topics like that. And I'm not going to shy away from them. You guys are counting on me to, I would think, share the information that's out there and then go and choose for yourself what you want to do. I know these guys well and I know what they're doing. I think there's some merits, especially long term with tropolalaps on the rise. And I think oftentimes because, and rightly so, I think many of us are very skeptical of the government and have been for many, many years. And also very skeptical of maybe even pharmaceutical stuff. That doesn't mean that there's not really good people and good things happening in the medical industry, even though there might be some bad, and vice versa. And so I don't want to, be like that where it's just, well, since all this stuff is bad, everything must be bad. Um, I think that really slows down progress. And I appreciate everyone who's been very positive towards it. I knew that would be a very argumentative topic, and actually I've gotten less negativity than I thought. Oh, I've gotten negativity, but a lot less than I thought. So thanks for saying that, Paul, and thanks for just continuing to watch us, and especially all the shenanigans that I pull. I'm sure that you've had your moments where you've rolled your eyes. I know Laurel has. Okay, I'm going to post this real quick.
Go ahead.
So this is Etienne Tardif's a channel or website rather, and on it you can go to his YouTube channel. This is hardcore winter information. If you want to really dial in and get your percentages of success in the north higher, I think this is one of the best places to start. He's a really smart guy, humble, and has really good information. You can go to his YouTube channel. He's very technical. If you're engineer mind, it'll be even better for you. But I think he does a good job breaking it down into nuts and bolts as well. And, there's some advantages to being up north. You don't reproduce as many mites as we do, but you also have to have really healthy big clusters to make it through your winters. And Etienne really helps you get there. So check his stuff out and give his YouTube channel a follow. I think you'd like that. So Tar Heel Beekeeper, Randy Southard over there in North Carolina. Thank you so much for saying so. We're all getting into a busy time of the year. I know some of us further north, not quite as much, but you're doing winter prep work or you're chomping at the bit. I really wanted to get on here and answer some questions. And, yesterday was really all about Dowland stuff and what they were doing. What we had is we had Doug and Stacy. They do an off-grid YouTube channel, which has always blown my mind because when you're making your living or a lot of it off of YouTube and social media and calling yourself off-grid, that just seems really bizarre. But they've also really poked fun at several companies and people that I like. And that really kind of pushed me over the edge on doing the interview. So you can thank Doug and Stacy for that interview, courtesy of them. Chris, let's get back. Go ahead.
2 more donations here. I don't want to miss one.
Okay,
from Brian.
Brian, thank you, sir. And keep the questions coming. And thanks for being a member. And
then you had one here from Jim as well, not to understate Brian.
Yeah, thanks for all the info. Well, thank you for saying so, Jim, and for being with us tonight. I like that name. My grandpa's name was Jim. Actually, it was technically Jimmy, but he always went by Jim. And he always liked the, bad Leroy Brown. All those songs right there. Jim Croce. Yeah, and Don't Mess Around with Jim. That's what he would sing all the time as we were growing up. And you don't mess around with Jim. So anyways, I think that was a different song, actually, Jim Croce did. But whatever. It's been a long day.
All right, you got a question here from Ricky.
Cayman, are you seeing an adequate number of drones yet for queen rearing in your area? Yes. I'm seeing on the big colonies, I'm seeing quite a bit, and I'm seeing a ton in the pipeline. And I'm not raising queens yet. And so I'm going to start 7-ish days from now, 7 to 10 days. And I know by then I'm going to have adequate drones, no problem. And so in some years I have adequate drones by now. And it depends on what you're raising. Are you raising 2 queens? Are you trying to raise 200? Big difference there. So if I was trying to raise 2 queens right now, as long as there's good flying weather, I'd say they get mated well. There's enough drones out there for 2 queens, good diverse amount of them. But if you try to do 100 right now, I think you're really pushing a little early. It's amazing what a week or so will do for you and we got a lot of young drones. So just uh, just hold your horses, especially if you're not in a tremendous rush. Always wait that an extra week. Doesn't hurt. Okay, getting scrolling back down.
All right, you got a question here from Steve. Steve's in Texas. He has two questions. Well, he had two statements. It was should he keep going is the question.
Okay, I've been open feeding for 10 days. I have 6 colonies. The neighbor has one. Feeding is around 400 feet away. 5 gallons every single day of 1-to-1 with brood booster. Get into your colonies, Steve, and see what they look like, because you don't want to plug them out, especially if they don't need it. So what I want to see on any strong colony is I want to see 21 pounds of the minimum amount of honey or sugar syrup weight. That is 3 deep brood frames, roughly. So I would prefer to see more than that if that's the minimum that I want. But if I'm seeing like the equivalent of you take half a frame here and a full frame here and a full frame here, and I'm seeing like 5 or 6 or 7, no more feeding. And maybe you're in that. And like the problem with open feeding is maybe you have some hives that are bigger and they could be slammed. And then you have a couple that still need a little bit more. And that's where spot feeding really comes in handy. A jar or a bucket would be great for that situation. But the only way that you'll be able to know is to do that. If your bees don't actually need weight, the only reason to open feed or do any feeding this time of the year would be to, one, if you're trying to draw comb and you think you can, or two, and primarily for me, is like I just want to get enough through them to clean out any pathogens, help with that anyways. Sugar syrup feeding does help clean out the bees system, and you just kind of get them stimulated and all that kind of stuff. Bees really need some thin nectar, and in some years we get some early thin nectar, and it's a very small quantity. So a little bit of sugar syrup can help. I think it's cheap insurance, but don't overfeed them. It'll be a problem later on for you when you need empty combs for the queen to lay in, and they're already plugged out.
You have a couple questions here about winter die-offs. Here's the first one from Kent.
I've had several hives that died over the winter in northern Indiana. Do I need to remove every bee that is dead head first in the cell? Also, any brood that didn't hatch out prior to dying? I never do, Kent. Let the bees do it. I would store that to where mice couldn't get it, as long as you're getting down in the freezing, and I'm sure you are there in northern Indiana. Those combs should be just fine from wax moss until you probably in your area get around May. I usually don't have any wax moss issues until I start getting into April here. And so I don't like all of my combs. They're just out there. The only thing I do is make sure I have some hardware cloth or something that's in the way, a lid that's protecting mice from getting in there and doing what they do. So I wouldn't bother removing any of those. Any loose bees, like if there's like a patch of them clustering on the frame, brush those off. But the ones down into the cell, it's too much labor. The bees will do a much more efficient job, and they're used to doing that. A lot of times when bees swarm, the first thing they would like to find is a cavity that's been preoccupied by a dead out that already has some comb. It's quite the lure, and they'll clean it out. They're really good at it. So the only time is if you knew it was like a disease problem, it would be a different situation. We don't see a lot of diseases like that anymore, though, because Varroa usually does a fantastic job of eliminating bees on its own, and just the combs and the bees never get old enough to express so much of this. And honestly, I think our bees in some ways are tougher than they've ever been, because in order to be able to survive all these extra pressures, they've had to be able to shed some of these lesser problems compared to Varroa and viruses. And so they're more actually, they've been selected by Varroa to be tougher against some of those other maladies.
Okay, you had another kind of a question here from Rare and Wonderful. Kind of a statement, kind of a question.
In Ohio, keeping bees for 40 years, going to winter strong, healthy Thanksgiving. Hive nearly empty, dead by Christmas week. Never had seen empty dead hives in winter. Well, I've never been in Ohio before as far as keeping bees there myself and overwintering them, so I can't tell you what it's like there. But typically, if I'm seeing bees dead early in winter, dead by Christmas week, I think it's a mite problem. what else is taking them out? Are they, if they're queenless, it could be that. It really, that's where I don't know Ohio that well, but I can tell you 100% without zero doubt that if I take even a package of bees here in Tennessee, by the time that package gets to October, it's starting to crash. And by the time winter comes around, 9 out of 10 of them are dead from viruses, especially if you have a lot of it. As this hive collapses and it's just riddled with billions of copies of virus copies, um, it gets robbed out by other colonies and it spreads from one to the other. So, you can get this domino collapse within a bee yard. And who knows? Maybe you did good mite control. You had a commercial beekeeper close to you or somebody else that didn't manage their bees. I don't know. But sorry to hear that. Rare and wonderful. And sounds like you've been keeping bees a really long time. Keep up the good work. I actually am bringing up nukes of mine to Toledo May 3rd. I'm sure there's other good nukes up in that area or bees, but we do have a handful of spots left for a Toledo delivery on May 3rd. I'm going up there and bringing some nukes to Chris. Chris already has several good bees, but he wants to grow his apiary. And I was like, well, if we're going to do that, let's open it up. So I think I'm delivering a few dozen in addition, probably around 24 in addition to Chris's nukes. And if anyone wants to pile in on that, they're still available on my website, caymansbees.com.
And just to add to that, we'll be the pickup will be right off of I-75 and Route 6 in Bowling Green, so you can be on and off the highways pretty quick. And there's plenty of gas stations, restaurants, restrooms, whatever. Not where we're at, but like within 2 minutes of a drive. So, hold on. There's a question I wanted you to answer. Sure.
This one?
No. Go ahead and do that.
So you'll see an email soon about it. The date when you purchased is still what's on schedule. So Corey's were the 26th of April. And so far, so good on that date. We haven't seen anything. It's easy. Again, like I said earlier, Corey's queens are coming already mated. It's a lot easier for us to really stick to a date. We've given ourselves extra time. So if anything, they'll be a little bit on the too strong side. And we may have to pull them back just slightly to be able to make sure that they're in the right position for you guys, but they'll be very strong nukes and ready to go. April 26th was the date for a Bloomfield, Missouri pickup. And I don't see any reason why that's going to change. So what timing, May 3rd, AM or PM? AM, but we might be able to be flexible on that. It's a Saturday. I'll probably be up there all day, and maybe Chris can help. Chris and I will talk about that. You can send us an email and about that, and if you have some specific needs, and if it's not too extreme on that date, we might be able to take care of it. We can't get too crazy. We just have so much going on.
Yeah. Okay. The question I wanted to do is from Birdies. I missed this one earlier.
Okay. Over it. So we do have some bulk honey for sale. Just buckets of honey. We're doing $4.50 a pound for pure unheated honey. Unheated is in unheated above normal. We warm it up to 90 degrees. As it's in the clarifier, so it's easier on our pumps and it flows through our system quite well. But 90 degrees is the same temperature as when we pull it off the hives. And so it's not heated as far as above. It's natural. And, we just strain it with a fine micron cloth that isn't small enough to take the pollens out, but it's big enough to get the pieces of wax and things out of there. So we have, about 10 drums left, and I need to get some more of it gone. So, yep. We've sold actually quite a few buckets so lately. I say 10 drums. We're probably down to about 8.5 now. I've sold a lot here recently, but still, I'd like it gone. I just don't have time to go to markets. I mean, I'm working 7 days a week. I mean, church on Sunday morning, and then just, boom, right back into it. I don't like it. Chris is helping me get caught up, but there's just so much expo work, so much stuff. I don't have time to go sell this stuff for $10, $15 a pound. So people that have those markets, it works out good. Buy a bucket of my honey, put in some jars. If you've already sold out, you'll have some honey you can resell, or heck, if you just want to eat it yourself, it's the best honey you've ever had. Nobody's ever made honey like this before. It's fantastic.
All right, you got a question here from.
Couldn't help myself.
Yeah, I know. You had a question here from Drew.
Came in equalizing do's and don'ts to slow down my big hives for 6 weeks till splitting. If they're really powerful colonies, it's hard to hurt them unless you just, pull them back way too far. So typically what I like to do is I want to pull a frame of old brood that has some emerging, because one, this is going to go into a colony that is behind where it needs to be. And if it's behind, that means it also is going to have a harder time regulating the temperature on that. Do's and don'ts, I still take the adhering bees on that frame of emerging brood and put them in there too. Bees go together really good this time of the year. The pollen's flowing. You can put a little bit of feed in there. I've dropped 2 queens into hives this March. Excuse me. And didn't put them in a cage or anything. I just had 2 hives that were queenless, and I combined 2 little colonies to them, and both of them were accepted without any queen cages. It's probably better if you did that, but I didn't have one with me, and it worked out fine in both instances. Now, if I'd have done that same thing in August, I would have killed both of them every single time in my August. So do add the bees, do an emerging frame to the little colony, because that's really going to slow down the big colony, and it's going to beef up that little colony fast and not really put a big burden on them on trying to really maintain and feed. All they have to do is, within a couple of days, there's thousands of newbies to help them expand and do their job. And, the other thing would be, as you are putting empty combs into the ones that you're pulling back, don't put those in between frames of brood. Put them up against the end of the brood. So if you have 10 frames in there and you've pulled out 2 frames of brood from a really powerful colony, put it up against the pollen or honey frame, up against the frame of brood. We don't want to separate brood this time of the year. You can get away with it in hotter times of the year. If you're getting some cold weather, don't do that. The other don't take the queen that's doing such a great job from the powerful one and swap her over. If you have another person in the yard, we always check the frame. And then if I don't see a queen on there, I hand it to Laurel or somebody else. If Chris or Talon is helping me, they will look at it. And, I like to have 2 people if you can. Double check it for sure. It'd be terrible to move a queen like that, but that's pretty much it right there. It's not too complicated. We don't want the big colonies to peak before the flow. Honestly, I want my colonies to peak a little bit after the start of the flow. Some people say peak right at the flow. I usually find it's better if they peak a week or so after the flow, because what's going to happen is we've already got that nectar coming in, and they're not in the swarm mode, and they've already committed, because don't have that stimuli of swarming. They've already committed to pushing that nectar up above the excluder and putting it into the honey supers and keeping that out of the brood nest. And so by the time they do peak at their population that's ideal for big honey crops, they've already committed and gone through that honey super and done all those things. So that's just my personal opinion on that.
Okay. Next up, we have a question here from Bill.
My hive overwintered in a 2-deep configuration. All the bees are in the top box. What should I do to get them into the bottom? So, Bill, this is what I typically do with that, because it can be an issue. And some colonies will dip down a little bit into the middle frames of the bottom box, or even up against the wall. If it's like the sun's hitting one side, sometimes you'll see them favor one side of the hive more than the other. Usually that's on the sunny side of the hive. But what you can do, it's all about weather, right? I've actually rotated several boxes in the last week, but I did that probably about 7, Monday or Tuesday, some of them a little bit before last Sunday, so probably 8 or 9 days ago. And I looked at the weather forecast. I'm like, okay, the average high is going to be around 70. So this is great weather for a rotation. It's getting down in the upper 30s and 40s. It's going to be okay. We're going to rotate the bottom box up onto the top of the other ones, and it'll be fine. And it will be. These are really strong colonies. We don't do these to colonies that are 6 frames strong. I mean, these are like 12 frames of bees. I mean, they're stacked. Now, if you're looking at the weather like, not so good, but they really need some space up in here. If you have excess food in that top box, put some of it down below and pull up a frame of empty drawn comb and put that up against the brood. Don't put it in the middle of brood, but put that up against. And so as that queen goes to the edge of where the brood is, oh, here's another frame that I can lay into. And that works out pretty good. So if I'm looking at a colony that really I feel like needs more space, but the weather is still going to be fairly cool, we're going to pull up probably 2 frames up in there, drop 2 frames of honey down below. But you shouldn't be doing this when you have a lot of course, crazy winter weather ahead of you where they could get isolated from the honey. So that's what I do.
All right.
I got one from Steve here. Hey, Steve, hope you're doing good over there. What do I do for spring treatments? Are you trying slow release OA? Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of oxalic acid vapor, of course, as you know, in December and January when they're broodless. I think not taking advantage of that broodless period and thrashing the mites down to almost nil is a big wasted opportunity. So by April, there will be mites in there, but they're not going to be very high at all. Honestly, you'll have a hard time even finding any with a wash. They're going to be so low. We have a good bit of research on oxalic acid extended release products. They're really good at maintaining the number. They're not good at knocking mites back. And so this, I feel like in April, we still have very low loads. I'm supering up. I'm not going to be probably getting in a little bit. I'm going to put some oxalic acid. I did this last year on about 50 colonies. Yeah, it was exactly 50 colonies, and it worked out good. I came back and did it again. And I also used another like a thiamol afterwards too as a cleanup, but we just didn't have as high of mite loads as we usually do in July and early August. And I overwintered. That was my best bee yard that I overwintered, but the mites just never got high enough to impact the colonies. And, at 1%, and I've said this many times, I'm going to keep saying it because I think it's good for us all to know this. A strong double deep colony, top to bottom, just packed with bees, that's about 40,000 bees. So 400 mites and 40,000 bees is a 1% infestation. You won't hardly see a mite unless you do an alcohol wash. You're not going to see them on bees. And occasionally, maybe if you're really looking hard, you'll find one in some drone larvae or whatever. But the bees look great. The brood patterns look good as long as there's a good queen and everything's right. And so you won't even visibly see there's a problem here. Those colonies, fast forward 2 months, oh, they look terrible, absolutely terrible, and then they're going to crash shortly after that. And so it's all about keeping those numbers low. 1% is where I want the mites to never get above, because the bees still look really good, and the viruses aren't wreaking havoc. You're not going to see virus issues, at least what I experience. So keep them low. Don't count on your mite treatments to pull you back from the brink. It's all about maintaining low numbers of mites. Your bees will thank you by being big and strong and healthy more often. The only other issues that we typically have is queens. Okay, we have a bad queen. Okay, you can have low mites, but if you have a bad queen, your engine's no good. And so great queens, dead mites, good nutrition. Nutrition, we can get into our hives every other week and go, oh, they need some food. The flow's over. Let's feed them. We can do stuff about that pretty easily. Mites, as long as we do a good job maintaining them, we can keep them down. But then how do we eval a queen? I think many of us new beekeepers, we don't eval queens very good. And I know I was bad about it. I was really bad about letting bad queens go too long because you just don't know. And so having more hives really helps you, because here's the deal. If you got 10 hives and 7 of them are just absolutely awesome, powerful colonies, why aren't the other 3 like that? What's going on here? Why are they behind? Okay, this one swarmed and lost a big population and requeened, and it took a little while, and now they're going. The brood pattern looks good. They're building up, but there's a nice clean pattern of brood. Everything looks good. They're just behind for that reason. Okay, the queen's good though. Good brood pattern. There's an excuse for that colony to be smaller. But this one over here, she's same old queen. They came through winter. Why is it not as strong? Okay, let's do an alcohol wash. Nope, the mite loads are in a good position. Okay, are we seeing European foul brood? Are we seeing chalk brood? And if we do see those things, I just kill the queen and replace it, because one, it provides a break for that. And also sometimes that's a genetic thing. So usually when we have European foul brood or any of those problems, we requeen the colony. And it's really important to have that break. We also feed, usually using one of the products that has thymol in the syrup mixture. So Hive Alive has that. Man Lake's Pro Health also has the thymol. Thymol's been used over 100 years in beekeeping. So we're going to feed during that time to cleanse that out, get a new queen in there for that break, because the EFB and a lot of those spores are in the honey and in the bees, the adults, even though it's the larvae that are being damaged and killed by, like EFB. It's being The adults aren't affected, as far as like they're okay. It's not going to get them, but they're feeding that and infecting the brood. So we need to flush it out of the adults as well. And having that break from the queen is important. And also many times, like, okay, why is this queen's genetics allowing this to have gotten to this point? Because every colony has EFB. It's just like some of them come down with it. So we need to be better as beekeepers of having backup plans for this. And so queen related issues, those events are not a big reason for issues, small colonies, and colony loss. And this is why I tell people, hey, if you want to be sustainable and not have to buy bees, you need to have some bees in your back pocket with a young queen. You want 3 hives in your backyard? That's your honey production colonies. Have 2 nukes with queens that you purchase each year. Those are your fresh queens and small colonies. And if one of your big ones goes down or you need to requeen, you introduce the full package. You've got brood pheromones you're introducing with her. She's been laying. She hasn't been in a cage coming through UPS. You're not waiting last minute. It's so much better. And if you end up, and if you get good at bees, you're going to end up with too many bees that way. And then you just sell them. You sell a nuke for 200 something dollars. And that helps pay for, getting a bigger extractor or whatever else you want, or going on a date with your spouse and reminding her or him that your hobby is totally awesome, because it is. It's the greatest hobby man's ever known. I segued a little bit there, Chris.
Slightly.
Yeah.
You got a question here from Matt Clark. It's kind of it's a 2-parter. Oh, it's not. It's
how many bees with deformed wings is a concern. So went through my queenless colony before combining and saw one. So one isn't that big of a deal, especially if there's a lot of bees. Sometimes you'll see it on a colony that won't even register mites. Many viruses have been around since before Varroa came over. There wasn't a dirty syringe like Varroa concentrating them and then injecting our bees directly and also affecting our bees' immune system. One is not a problem, but if I'm seeing it, I'm also going to evaluate the situation. So if it's a queenless colony, and you haven't combined it yet, I'm like oxalic acid and treat these guys and clean out any mites in there. And so, but it could be just an isolated incident, because what can happen is you have a small mite population, but for whatever reason, that cell got infected with maybe even more than one foundress mite, and you got a couple mites in there, and that larvae is just getting bludgeoned. And so it develops and it has deformed wing. And sometimes deformed wing could be from damage, not just from deformed wing virus, but it could be, was there damage to the wing of that bee, maybe as the varroa mite bit it? Or could there be something else there? So if I'm seeing one, I'm going to follow up and do probably a oxalic acid treatment, because they're broodless, but maybe do a wash too. We don't want to take these bees if they're laden with mites and then combine them to a good colony. So whenever we do equalizing, that's another don't that I failed to mention earlier. We never give good frames of brood or try to beef up sickly colonies. We'll not do it. Just, the sickly colonies need to be fixed on their own. And once you get a good queen in there and it's a good pattern, even if it's only 3 frames of bees at this point, but you're like, all right, everything's cleaned up, there's a good pattern, now we can add bees to it. But if I'm going to start divvying up brood from big colonies, unless I have no other option, I would just as soon make a whole new split with that. because a lot of times you give it to a bad queen, yeah, it'll give them a short boost, but it's just a flash in the pan. They go back down because they go down to whatever the queen's capabilities are, or whatever the disease and stuff is keeping them down to.
Hey, you got 2 questions real quick. One from Terry. I wanted you to address real quick here.
How much do you want by the pound if I buy all of the barrels? I cut you a much better deal for sure. I have to keep some of it. I do have some stores, and they've lynched me, and my mother would lynch me. The stores never have a chance. So, I mean, I've got my email, and you can reach out on caymansbees at gmail.com. And if you're serious about getting a bunch of honey, let me know how much, and we'll work something out. I'll have to think about it a little bit and how much I actually can part with, because I won't be extracting till June. I got to make sure I got enough to last me till then. But I can definitely go. I think if I save like 3 barrels, 2.5, that'd probably be enough.
All right, here, question here from, kind of a question statement here from Michael.
I see a lot more use of essential oils in beekeeping. Fat Bee Man was using these methods 15 years ago on his videos. Your bees do what works. Fat Bee Man did a little bit of everything. He was really an interesting guy, because one minute he was talking about his treatment-free bees, and the next one he was talking about using this for treating bees and his hives, and how he treated his hives with walnut holes. And literally, there's a video out there where he's using walnut holes to treat for mites and various things. I've met Don a couple times. He's one of the reasons I started a YouTube channel, because I thought, well, if he can be successful at this, I definitely can. Bob Benny got into YouTube because of Don the Fat Bee Man. So we should all be very thankful for Don for that reason alone. But Don was a buyer of Georgia packages from other companies. I've talked to the companies that sold them. I've talked to bee inspectors that inspected them, and I've been to Don's. And he was a package flipper with a YouTube channel. That's what he was. And hey, I know some people they make tons of money flipping packages, but I think it's frustrating and very dishonest to say that these are special breeds of bees of yours, and they're just general Italian packages, and you're using your YouTube channel to charge almost double for it. It was all, and for some YouTubers, it is literally all about the clicks. I think all of you know this. There's a lot of things that I could do to get more clicks. It's more important to me that we have useful information, and we're not perfect. Absolutely not. We try not to lead you guys on with videos and get you guys just to click. And we're also not interested in really getting, like, I guess we could focus a little bit more on getting people outside of the bee industry, because there's a lot of videos that we could do that you guys wouldn't enjoy, but we could get a lot of non-beekeepers to follow our channel, and we could get a lot more views from probably non-beekeepers if it was clickbait. The sky is falling, did you know that honey is being done like this, and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff. I get a lot of suggestions, even by the YouTube algorithms, on what we could do to get more views. This is supposed to be a community, supposed to be helpful. We don't know everything. And that's why I recommend guys like Bob Benny and Etienne Tardif and several other people, because ultimately this space and our Bee Expo is about the beekeeping community working together to solve problems, become stronger. And the best way that we can do that is to start with the newest beekeepers and be able to keep them in the industry. We all have got to get better at this, and we can, and we are. I've seen a lot of progress just in general over the last 5 to 6 years. And a lot of that has to do with guys like Bob Benny becoming leaders. I'm very thankful for him. He's helped Laurel and I out a bunch, and a lot of other people. And we want to be like Bob in that regard. So Don had some useful information for sure. I mean, there were some things that he said that were absolutely the case. But that's a problem. It just depends on which video, what you were getting from Don.
All right, you have a question here from Honey and the Coop.
Cayman, what are your thoughts on the 7-frame Apame hive? Any insights on Hilco adding a 7-frame nuke to their Hive 365 lineup? So funny enough, after I got off with Dalen, whatever. I never can get that right. Last night on their chat, John and I had to talk because I'm going up through his place and we need to get some frames and stuff. I'm a little bit short and stuff, and Chris is wanting to get some stuff. And so, unfortunately, we're going through on a weekend, and John's like, "Yeah, we'll take care of you," and I appreciate it because we don't really have a flexible schedule. And then John and I got to talking about several other things. Um, we didn't talk much about 365. Next time I talk to John, I'll ask him about that. My opinion on the 7-frame Apame hive is that it's really nice. I have fooled with the Apame hives now quite a bit. I did videos on them, but I wouldn't just come on out and say, "Hey, this is great," because I need experience with things. I need to be able to use it a good bit. I've used Apame now for several years, and I even hauled some of them up to Wisconsin. Um, those things are great. They're extremely tough. They're durable. They pressure wash great if you're wanting to clean them up. A little bit of bleach and a hose works good too. The pollen traps are really nice. They're not perfect. There's some things I would tweak slightly, um, but no, they're a really good hive. I think you pay more, but then if you calculate, okay, I'm getting feeders, I'm getting a pollen trap, I have a screen bottom board, but I can also shut off most of the airflow with the IPM tray. I also, it comes with all the rest of the stuff, and it's insulated and a few other odds and ends. I know I'm missing stuff, but long story short, though it's super easy to move and it's almost bear proof. um, and and there's actually videos of it where bears like give up after beating it up because when you have it latched, it's really difficult for bears to get into it. And the bees are dealing out punishment to the bear while the bear's trying to figure out how to get into this thing, and the bear's just getting stung up and it's not getting any reward. So yeah. But anyways, they're nice. They're expensive. The 7-frame ones are really cool. I think it's a neat size. Especially if I've used mine that I have for queen rearing many times because when I start queen rearing, I use a starter and then a finisher. So when I'm going to start, and this is answering someone's question right here, when I start queen rearing, usually the 3rd week of March. So we're right on it. And so, yeah, how long before you start grafting? So it's the third. I mean, it's just we're right on top of it. The drones are in the right position to CS Steinbach. So we're fixing to do that. But the Apame hive or any insulated hive, I think, is ideal for early grafting and raising queen cells because what we're trying to create is the perfect environment in a very low stress environment. So an insulated hive is obviously it's going to be easier for the bees to manage the temperature in there, keep it ideal for the cells and all that. So if it's cold weather, I always use an insulated hive to help with that for sure. But yeah, they're very tough, extremely tough pieces of equipment. It's USA plastic. Okay. Yeah, King Bob, 100%. I asked Bob if I could make a King Bob thing for the conference next year, and he looked at me, and I think he almost got stern for a second. He's like, "I really don't want you to do that, Cayman." It was about that, but for Bob, that was, I was pushing it. So no, we're not going to do that to him. I'm not going to do that to him anyways.
Got a couple more questions for you here, and we can wrap it up. We're just over an hour and a half in.
Okay. Yeah. We'll go. Let's do a rapid fire on like 10 more minutes, and then get out of here.
All right. Got an easy one for you from Hill Hives.
Other than the 4 ways from Bob, what's your new purchase / improvement for this season? Good question, Hale. Hope you guys are having a good season down there. So I did purchase a used 650. It's a Ford 650 with a 20-foot flatbed on it. And I just, Chris and I are going next week to do a video with Hummerbee, and I'm picking up a Turbo 2. And it's a big investment. I'm going to make payments. I don't like getting loans, but I've been doing so much stuff with my back and I'm tired of it. Like my back gets so out of whack, and it's not like we're doing 5 to 10 hives either. We're doing hundreds of them. We're making all these nukes, and I've got stacks of wood and ware, and everything has to be picked up one at a time. And so, given what I feel like I'm going to be doing over the next, God willing, I'm alive for another few decades, I'm going to need a forklift for a long period of time. So I think it's a good investment. It was a hard decision to make. But the Hummer Bee is a good product, and I'm looking very much forward to doing that. So that product, the F650, I did get a bunch of Premier boxes, and I did get some 6-frame nukes. We're going to put those on some pallets as well, kind of like Ian's, except they're going to be 4-way pallets spacing, but have 6-frame nukes. Yeah, tax write-offs. That's what we're doing this for. I knew there was some reason we were making all this crazy spending, but no, I want to get more into bees. I don't want to get out of bees at all, and but I want to be able to do it well and efficiently. And I also have Talon Redding helping me part time. Chris is helping me full time now, and so that's freeing me up to be able to do a little bit more things in the bee world, which is fun for me. But Talon and Chris will be helping me, and I don't want these guys having to abuse their backs either. Like, I'll abuse mine, but I don't want to abuse any of my friends' backs. And that kind of thing. And my kids are starting to help more too. I definitely don't want their backs hurt either. So the forklift is going to be very helpful, and I'm looking forward to that. Hey, Rob. Yeah, the Hummer Bees are pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to getting to mess with that.
All right. Easy question for you from Levi.
Hey, Cayman, what kinds of bees are in your nukes that you bring to Toledo, Carney or Italian? So they definitely lean more towards Carney, but I open made everything, and nobody around here that I know of does anything but Italian. And so I will have bees that are very much more Carney and dark, but over a while, they just start getting more yellow. And that's pretty normal. And so occasionally I bring some stock in from some Carney sources. I'm going to try some Caucasians in the future, but you might get a queen from me that is solid black, no joke. And then most of the time you'll see like a brown with black, and then sometimes you'll get one that's almost yellow, a solid yellow. And so ultimately, we only breed from the survivors, so that's what we're going for, just a good bee. We also want something that's very gentle too. Obviously, our bees sting as well, but we want bees that have a good disposition and are productive. And we eliminate any queens that suffer from EFB and chalk brood. And I think that does a really good service, because we just don't have issues with that, because we just select that out of the gene pool. So I think we have, but the ones we're bringing up to Toledo are going to be just mine. Papers on my bees. Oh, not more paperwork, please. Do standard wood frames fit well with the Apame hive, 10 frames per deep? Yes, they do. Now, whenever you use the dividers in between, it's tighter than I would like. And so that's a little bit of a bummer. I wish the divider was a little bit thinner. It still works. It's just tight. So if you're planning to use the divider, do not drop your spacing in a 10-frame box down to fat 9s. You'll never be able to get 5 frames in there and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, oh, hey, David, thank you so much. We were just talking about you earlier today. One of the guys was asking, he's like, who's that guy that was with us dipping? I can see him, but I can't remember his name. I'm like, David McDade? And he's like, no, that's right, the other David. Yeah, who's the other David? So we appreciate you hanging out with us and wax dipping and helping us at the conference, David, and pack the bag. So then thank you for supporting us yet again. If you need anything, holler at me, okay? Hope you're enjoying that beeswax.
All right, now don't go over promising here, but I'll give you a nice fat softball.
Okay. Have you ever thought about teaching hands-on classes for queen rearing? I have. I haven't had the time to put things together. I really want to do a lot of courses. I want to do several smaller events on very different format from the Bee Expo that are more personal and hands-on. But I just haven't had the time. Chris is like totally, him and several other guys are working hard to make the Bee Expo way bigger and better than it's ever been before, more organized, a lot more bells and whistles. Once we get more of those systems into place, it is our intention to have these other offerings. We're not quite there yet. And I could do more teaching, honestly, if I would stop keeping so many bees. But I don't like you guys that much. I'm sorry. I want to keep bees.
All right, here's your.
This is my closer.
Well, yeah,
I still have 2 questions left. I'm looking at the time here. I still have. Okay. I have like 4 minutes.
Here's an easy one for you.
What type of wax are you using for your wax dipping of woodenware? I used to get it from candlemaking.com out of Knoxville. It's also called Aztec, and I would get a blend of half paraffin, half microcrystalline. Now I just get it from Jed Thorne. He makes the wax dippers. He brings it at my conference, and he has it at a show special. This stuff is actually tested for and blended to have great penetration into woodenware, and actually has a PhD, Tony Kadai, who's done work with this product and how it works with boxes. So I feel like I know both of them work. They totally work. Go with whatever is cheaper is my recommendation. But if it makes, I prefer to get the Hive Guard because I know that it's food grade. I know it's been tested, and I also like supporting American business. Jed Thorne, and he gets it from the guys up in Canada with Canada Wax. We support a Canadian business at the same time. So what could be wrong with that? Please do a road trip to Australia, Melbourne, please. Hey, sign me up, Mike. I mean, I want to go to Australia big time. Is that Dippy Doo hair, Cayman? No, this is Dapper Dan hair. Get it right, Garrett.
Now, Cayman,
I'm a Dapper Dan man.
You do know they have spiders that are bigger than you in Australia. Like there's real truth to everything in Australia that tries to kill you.
Yeah, well, those, you've never seen me in the wild, man. I'm pretty tough. You see these hands right here? They may not be long fingers, but yeah, don't mess with me.
All right, you got a good question here.
I had two brothers, and I was the smallest one. I had to fight.
Got a good question here from Gun Runner, Gun Dogs, and Game Birds. Look at that.
I came out of winter with several really weak hives. Do I have time to get them built up for the Alabama honey flow, or should I write those off for being honey producers? Roll Tide. See, a man of class, a man of culture. So the honey flow in Alabama, especially if it's southern Alabama, is getting close to going if it's not already going, if I had to guess. I'm sorry, I just saw Melody Cruz comment. Melody, come on, you're throwing me off here. So, if they're really weak still, then, but what do you have to lose? Unless you're wanting to split and get more bees, beef them up. But I don't know. It really depends on the location. In Tennessee, we have a lot of variables. Like there's some guys that make honey out west with the cotton and soybean flows up until like August. Mine shuts down the second week of June. So I don't know what yours is like there. You may have cotton and soybeans and stuff producing quite a ways out and still can get your bees beefed up to make some honey. So that's really, I don't know how weak your hives are. You say you several really weak hives. It really just depends on your flows and stuff. I'd have to know more information. Sorry, I can't be more useful. And boo Auburn, all that important stuff. How much honey is in 1 gallon of sugar water? Not much at all. So, well, it depends on the ratio too. Are we dealing with 1-to-1 or 2-to-1? 1-to-1, I don't know this for a fact, but if I had to guess, 1-to-1, a gallon of 1-to-1 probably condenses down to honey thickness a quart maybe. And here's what you have to consider too, and this is where it's hard to tell. It's like I'll feed them a gallon of 1-to-1, and yeah, it goes into the cones. But by the time they dehydrate all the water out of it, and by the time they eat what they need, if they're light on food, they burn through a gallon of 1-to-1 crazy fast. 1-to-1 doesn't get you a whole lot of weight gain on a big, powerful, double deep colony. So it's not a lot. And so that's why I like 2-gallon feeders. Unless it's very specific, I'm not really interested in the feeder smaller than 1.5 gallons. The 1.5 gallon frame feeders are nice. I've seen people use the 1-gallon bucket feeders, and it's not that they don't have some merits, but the problem is whenever you really need to feed a colony and put on some weight, or you're trying to draw a lot of comb on a big colony, 1 gallon is just a drop in the bucket. 2 gallons all the way. 2 gallons is a good size. And the nice thing about frame feeders is okay. So I only need to feed this one 1 gallon. I'll only fill it halfway full. But yeah, 1-to-1 doesn't go very far. 2-to-1 goes, I would imagine, twice as far, but I don't have accurate numbers for that. Maybe Chris can work that competition into the expo next year. Ha ha ha. 6 pounds of stored sugar. Well, someone's using their brain there. So, I'd have to really sit down and do some math. Honestly, it's too late. I've been going too long. It's hard for me to think and answer at this speed. I try not to slow down too much because I don't want the live chat to be boring. I really don't enjoy slow and boring live chats myself, and so I try to rapid fire. But then whenever I have to slow down and actually think through something like that, I'm like half cooked at this point. I'm an hour and 45 minutes in, so don't expect much. Melody, please just no. Thank you, Marianne Sears. Much appreciated. So Brian Reese says, do you have the YouTube link for North of 60? The link on the site is dead. Uh-oh. Hey, Chris, can you look up Etienne Tardif real quick on YouTube? It probably will pull up pretty easy for you. Do you mind doing that? Oh, Chris, dang it. He's already done it. Oops, I just took it down. See if that works, Brian, and get back with me. And once Brian says, forget about it, we're out of here. I can't do your accent, Brian. Laurel and I love it though. It's hilarious. Thanks for you and your son helping us out. Police the front doors and multiple things. We have a lot of volunteers like that. Brian, we can't get rid of him. But it's perfect because whenever you open up a door that you're not supposed to be in, you have someone from Jersey, like, hey, what are you doing? You straighten up pretty quick if you're smart. Thanks. All right, Brian. Brian's given us the go ahead to Vamonos. Get out of here. We're gone. See you later. Sayonara. Happy beekeeping. We hope you guys have a great couple of weeks with your bees and continue to have a great season throughout the rest of the year. We won't be doing a live this next week because we'll be traveling, but we're going to film that and share that with you. And then we will be back the following weekend with a live chat. So if you have any questions, bring them for that. Thanks for so many great questions, and we'll see you in the next video.